In the spring of 1876, in the lawless expanse of the Black Hills, a man named Daniel Boone May stepped off a stagecoach in Deadwood, South Dakota, carrying little more than a Winchester rifle and a reputation that had followed him north from Texas. The town was barely a settlement, a scattered collection of canvas tents and rough-cut timber buildings thrown together in the muddy gulches, where gold had been discovered only months before. Thousands of prospectors, gamblers, and drifters poured into the territory, and with them came a wave of violence that territorial law had no capacity to control. May was 28 years old, lean and quiet, with dark eyes that missed nothing. He had worked as a scout and tracker in the Indian Wars, spent time hunting buffalo across the Nebraska plains, and developed a skill with firearms that men spoke of in careful tones. He did not carry himself like the loudmouth gunmen who crowded Deadwood saloons. He moved through spaces without announcing his presence, and when he did speak, his words were few and deliberate. Within weeks of his arrival, the Black Hills Stage and Express Company hired him as a shotgun messenger, tasked with protecting gold shipments on the treacherous routes between Deadwood and Cheyenne. The Deadwood Road was a killing ground. It wound through narrow canyons and dense pine forests where road agents waited in cover, knowing the schedules of the stages and the value of what they carried. Between 1876 and 1878, more than 24 robberies occurred along that single route. Drivers were shot from their seats. Messengers were killed before they could raise their weapons. Strongboxes were pried open and emptied, and the bandits vanished into the wilderness where posses could not follow. The express companies lost thousands of dollars. Investors threatened to abandon the Black Hills entirely if the shipments could not be secured. May rode the box seat beside the driver, a double-barreled shotgun across his lap and a revolver on each hip. He studied the terrain as the stage rolled forward, watching the tree lines and the placement of boulders along the road. He noted where ambushes had occurred before and where they would likely occur again. He did not sleep on the runs. He did not drink. When the stage stopped to change horses, he remained on the box, scanning the ridges and listening to the silence. In August of 1877, outside the settlement of Hat Creek, 4 men blocked the road. They wore bandanas over their faces and carried rifles. The driver hauled back on the reins, and the horses stamped and snorted in the dust. One of the road agents called out for the strongbox to be thrown down. May did not answer. He raised the shotgun and fired both barrels into the group. 2 men went down immediately. The other 2 scattered into the brush, firing wild shots as they ran. May reloaded, dismounted, and followed their tracks into the trees. He returned 20 minutes later, alone. He climbed back onto the stage without explanation, and the driver whipped the horses forward. The incident made May's name known across the territory. Express companies began requesting him specifically for high-value runs. Road agents learned to recognize the stages he rode and began avoiding them. But the violence did not stop. In the fall of 1877, a gang led by a man named Frank Towle began operating between Deadwood and Custer City. Towle was methodical and ruthless. He planned his robberies carefully, struck quickly, and killed anyone who resisted. In October, his gang stopped a stage carrying nearly $15,000 in gold dust. The driver was shot through the chest. The messenger, a man named Gale Hill, was dragged from the box and executed on the road. Towle's gang took the gold and disappeared into the northern hills. The express company offered a $500 reward. May volunteered to track them. He left Deadwood alone, carrying only his rifle, a bedroll, and enough provisions for a week. He moved through the hills without a trail, reading tracks in the dirt and broken branches in the underbrush. He asked no questions in the settlements he passed. He simply moved forward, closing the distance. On the 4th day, he found their camp in a narrow ravine south of Spearfish Creek. 4 men sat around a fire, their horses picketed nearby. May approached on foot in the darkness, working his way down the slope until he was within rifle range. He did not call out. He did not offer surrender. He fired into the camp, and the night erupted in gunfire and screaming. When the shooting stopped, 3 men lay dead. The 4th, wounded in the leg, tried to crawl into the brush. May followed him, disarmed him, and dragged him back to the fire. The man was Frank Toll. May brought Towle into Deadwood tied across the back of a horse. The wound in his leg had turned septic, and by the time they reached town, Towle was barely conscious. He was placed in a makeshift jail, a dirt-floored shack with iron bars bolted to the logs. He died 3 days later without standing trial. The gold was never recovered. May collected the reward and returned to work on the stages without comment. In 1878, May was appointed Deputy Sheriff of Lawrence County. The position carried no salary beyond fees collected from arrests. It was a dangerous job that few men wanted and fewer survived. May accepted it without hesitation. He began pursuing fugitives across the territory, tracking horse thieves into Wyoming and bringing back murderers from Montana. He worked alone, traveled light, and operated outside the boundaries of formal jurisdiction. Local sheriffs tolerated his methods because he delivered results. Outlaws feared him because he did not negotiate and did not quit. In the winter of 1879, May tracked a man named Sam Bass, wanted for stage robbery and murder, into the Bighorn Mountains. The pursuit lasted 11 days, through snow and freezing temperatures. May found Bass in a trapper's cabin, half-starved and frostbitten. Bass surrendered without resistance. May brought him back to Deadwood, where he was tried and hanged in March. By 1880, the Black Hills had begun to stabilize. Railroads reached the territory. Federal marshals established permanent offices. The era of isolated violence and unchecked outlawry was ending. May continued working as a lawman until 1883, when he resigned and moved south into Wyoming. He lived quietly in the years that followed, working as a ranch hand and avoiding attention. He died in 1903, largely forgotten, his name absent from most histories of the frontier. The records that remain are sparse. Court documents list arrests. Newspaper accounts describe shootings. But the details of his methods, his motives, and the full scope of his actions were never written down. What is known is that during the most violent years in the Black Hills, Daniel Boone May rode the Deadwood Stages and protected the gold that built the territory. Men who tried to stop him died in the dust, or were dragged back to face trial. The road became safer because he made it so, and the violence that defined that era ended in part because he refused to let it continue.